was a crusader for civil rights, among those freedom riders who went to jail in Mississippi for what she believed. And you see all this red? Well, she is a member, I understand the first white member, of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland. I'm Sam Ford, and this is our podcast about, well, a legend in the civil rights community. So how long have you been at Delta?
Well, I joined back in '63, and then I was inactive for a few decades, and now I'm back in.
I see. So, and I understand you've been going to Selma for the remembering the,
the beatings, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and yeah.
So, tell us, how old were you when you got involved in civil rights?
I think I was 18.
What
18.
Were you a student somewhere, or what?
I was a student at Duke University, and the Presbyterian chaplain, we had Sunday night meetings, and he said next week there will be some students who are involved in the demonstrations in town. This is Durham, North Carolina, and they're going to come and speak to us about what's going on, but keep it quiet. We don't want the administration to lock us out of the building. We don't want the police to come and arrest us or the rowdies to come and cause trouble. And these well-dressed, well-spoken students from North Carolina College came and spoke to us and explained the demonstrations in moral and legal terms, and then invited us to join them. So a handful of us did, and that led to the picket lines, and it led to the lunch counters twice, and to the jail cells and the courtroom, and ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court, which overturned all the convictions, saying that demonstrating was freedom of speech.
Wow. Okay. So now you're 83 years old now.
Yeah, I'm an old lady.
You were 18 then.
Yeah, it's been a while.
What do you think about how you spent your life in those years?
I got into a lot of good trouble, as the saying goes now, and I think I spent it well, yeah, for a good cause. And I even graduated from college.
So
that was almost secondary, though.
Okay, and you graduated from?
Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi. What today is called an HBCU, but it's just called a colored college, or the other term for colored, which I won't say. But
that's what it was.
That's what it was.
Back in 1960.
Well, I graduated in '64, and I entered in '61.
Okay. So tell us about it like then. So you had this meeting, you decided to go and listen to the group. So how do you get from there to being locked up in a Mississippi jail?
Oh, you ride a bus. But no, I didn't ride a bus though. But the administration at Duke wanted to kick us out, and I learned just a few years ago the only reason we weren't expelled was because the university professor said they'd go on strike if they kicked us out. And but we had to get psychiatric counseling, the administration insisted. And then I didn't want to go to Duke in the first place, but Mama had insisted I couldn't go to that little church school where my Sunday school teacher went off in Ohio. She and her husband went there. You've probably heard of them. His name was John Glenn.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had to go someplace important, and I think she really was thinking segregated in the South. But she picked Duke University, and I finally gave up and went just to get away from Mama, You know that feeling. And that was Mama's big mistake, because that got me straight into the civil rights movement.
And how did Mama feel about that?
Oh, Mama was beside herself. She, as it continued, she ended up cutting off all financial aid, like college tuition for Tougaloo. she'd send me money to come see them on vacation time and try to talk me out of going back, but Mama was not happy. She was from rural Georgia, sharecroppers family, and back then the state law, the society, the church, everything supported segregation. And that's the way she grew up. She was a product of her environment. And
so what would she say to you?
I can't remember exactly, but she was against it, and you know, don't do that again, and why are you doing that?
And what about your father?
Now my daddy, he was the opposite, but they had agreed to disagree on this. They'd both come to D.C. for Roosevelt's good government jobs and all that. And my daddy was from this little town in southwest Iowa, about 500 people, and the town doctor had a good friend who would come visit from time to time with pockets full of peanuts, and he'd just throw them out in the grass for a scavenger hunt for the kids. Oh, he was the hero to every kid in town. And
what was this doctor's name? Or this?
George, I don't remember the doctor, but the Eastman, I think the doctor was, but the guy with the peanuts was George Washington Carver. And so if you grew up with a black dude as your childhood hero, you are not prejudiced. But Daddy supported our goals in the movement, but he didn't like me being in the demonstrations because he was afraid his darling sweet daughter would get seriously injured.
I see.
I was a sweet girl back then. Ho ho.
So, but you obviously continued in the movement because you somehow got from Duke University over to Mississippi. Now, were you a member of this organization called SNCC?
Oh yeah. In
Student Nonviolent
Coordinating Committee. Well, I went to their fall meeting, and that's where I got the idea of Tougaloo. This was the year Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes integrated the University of Georgia under court order, and we met with riots and tear gas and being taken off campus twice in squad cars, and I thought, this is not integration. Just a couple of colored students going through this. If integration is real, it's got to be a two-way street. Maybe I should go to a colored college. So I talked that idea over with the SNCC leadership at their fall conference, and they agreed it was a good idea. And somebody said, probably John Lewis, well, if you're going to do it, you may as well go to Mississippi, because those students haven't done anything yet, meaning they haven't had any sit-ins. Maybe you could help them get started. Now imagine sending a white Southern girl to Mississippi to help the black students get started on civil rights demonstrations. Well, it was crazy, but I applied to Tougaloo College, the only school that was nationally accredited that colored kids could go to in case you wanted to go to graduate school or something. And then I got a letter from them after I applied and said, we have gotten your Duke's transcripts. We haven't heard from your high school yet. So I called my high school and talked to the guidance counselor, and she said, we're not going to send your transcripts to that school. Well, I knew what she meant by that school. So I called Tougaloo and told them, and they understood what that school meant too. They said, well, we'll accept you with your Duke transcripts. I was an honor student at Duke, so that was good enough. And then along came the freedom riots, and that got me to Mississippi.
So tell us about the Freedom Rides. Now, the Freedom Rides, but there are pictures of you sitting at a lunch counter.
Oh, that wasn't
surrounded
the Freedom
by,
Rides.
Huh?
That wasn't the Freedom Rides.
Well, which came first?
Freedom Rides.
Okay, well tell me about the lunch counter stuff first, since we have pictures of that. What was that all about?
Well, that was about Woolworth's segregated lunch counters, and I wasn't really even supposed to be there. I was supposed to be a spotter, a witness who could call back to Medgar Evers' office and let him know what's happening. I was supposed to be a spotter for a picket line a block down the street at another place. It was supposed to be a distraction for the police so the sit-in students could get in. Well, the picket line, much to our surprise, got arrested right away. And I called Medgar's office, and then me and the other white spotter went down to Woolworth to see what was happening. We hadn't seen any paddy wagons or squad cars down there. And when we went in, there was Memphis Norman got pulled off his stool, and a guy, a former cop who had been dismissed from the force because he was so brutal, was kicking Memphis until he was, pulled him off the stool, kicking him till he was bleeding out of every hole in his head. And then they both got arrested, I think for disorderly conduct, and that left just the two girls at the counter, so I sat down with them and on Memphis's stool, and then we got drug off the stools basically by our hair and taken to the door of the store, and then we broke loose and got back to the counter. My son has written about that and called it his book, Get Back to the Counter. That was my only thought at the time. And so we sat down where we could get a seat, and
what were they saying to you? What was?
Oh, those aren't words we use in public, sir.
Oh, really?
Well, they were calling me a nigger lover and a bitch, and things like that.
Were you scared?
No, I don't do fear. Fear paralyzes your brain and keeps you from thinking what you need to do to stay as safe as possible in the situation. So I never do fear.
But you were being punched. Were you being hit? Were you being...
I wasn't being much. I was basically just getting that sugar dumped on my head. Like I wasn't sweet enough already.
So they were putting sugar in your hair?
Yeah, they were putting all sorts of stuff on us. Anything that was, on the lunch counter, the ketchup, the mustard, they were dumping it on us.
And you were kind of bent over, and I just... but I would have think you'd have been just terrified, just frozen in fear.
No, I had what I'd call an out-of-body experience, like the real me had left the physical body and was up above like a guardian angel, looking out for me, letting me know what I should do in the situation. But don't do fear. Now, when Professor Salter joined us, they hit him with brass knuckles and broke, I think, a sugar canister and was scraping that on him. But I say that is probably the most integrated sit-in that took place. Professor Salter was a Native American tribal member. I'm white, and Ann Moody's black. And we didn't have any Asian American students that semester on campus, so we had it pretty well covered.
I see, and so...
And it's the most used sit-in photo in the world, even more than the Greensboro guys.
Yeah. And so as you look back on that, what are some of your thoughts when you look back at that picture?
Well, I remember what we were doing. We were sometimes praying, holding hands and praying. We were cracking jokes. We were telling Professor Salter, that final exam wasn't fair. You didn't cover all that in class.
This is what you were discussing as a mob was around you.
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, we had finished exams, final exams, out at college. It was a good time for us to demonstrate, but it was final exam week at the local high school just a couple blocks away, and the students, upperclassmen with good grades, they could come uptown and get lunch, which meant the lunch counter, no fast food joints to be had, and they couldn't get lunch on their big day out because the counter was closed with us sitting there, and they were not happy. So you know how those high school kids are. One says something nasty and the next one tries to outdo them, so they took us on. But we just sat there non-violently.
Wow. Okay, and Freedom Rider. I saw that big poster with all these pictures of Freedom Riders on it. And there's one of Joan Trumpauer.
Yeah. Well, the Freedom Rides were stopped in Alabama, Birmingham, and outside of Anniston. And so then the students who had been sitting in around the South kept the Freedom Rides going. Hundreds, well, dozens of them. And 3 people from our Howard sit-in group left immediately. And I got a call from Paul Dietrich, who was from the Howard group. And he said, "Joan, we're trapped. I can't talk. We're trapped in the church in Montgomery. Send more riders." At that point, there was a mob outside and everything, but everybody who wasn't going to be able to get out that night could make, every family unit could make one phone call, and it was timed to like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So I made a few phone calls and got 5 of us together, including my good buddy for the rest of his life, Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture. And we flew from D.C. to New Orleans, and it only cost $52 and change for a one-way ticket. Times have changed. And we put together with a few other, I think, a handful of other people from elsewhere, I think the Yankees. And then we took the train, the Illinois Central, headed toward Chicago, and got off in Jackson. Now we're trying to come to Jackson from different directions, different means of transportation, keep the authorities just a touch off guard. And then we went into one of the waiting rooms, I forget which, sat down, and Captain Ray came in. "Move on and move out. Y'all hear me? You're going to do it? You're under arrest." And so it was off to the city jail, and after we went to court, it was off to the county jail, and then up to Parchman Prison Farm, the most dreaded prison in the country.
You were in Parchman.
I was in Parchman.
So what was it like in jail? What was the jail situation like?
Well, it was pretty nasty over in the county jail. We were up to 31 prisoners in the white woman's cell. So
they segregate the cells.
Of course.
Okay.
It wasn't just men and women segregated, it was black and white, not together. But we had less than floor space per prisoner, not 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, but 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. So that was just real cozy to sleep. And one girl always slept curled up in the dripping shower stall. But
And you were all protesters.
yeah. Well, I think we might have had one other woman in there, but for a while.
But you said, but there were 30 white women who were protesting with the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least 30. So Parchman was an improvement. It was roomier. We only had we had bunk beds, and sometimes we had a couple other people in, but we had mattresses for them. No more than 4 people in a cell. And the food was just way better without that added protein from the bugs on the floor.
Okay.
And it was free room and board for the summer. Because I was going to Tougaloo when I got out. I didn't have any place else to go, so, I just stayed as long as I could. You served your sentence. And then, which for me was 2 months suspended, and then $3 off your fine for every additional day you served. So I stayed till my last chance to get out and go out to Tougaloo. And
what was that like? Was it scary being locked up like that?
No, I don't do scary. We had fun. We would sing freedom songs. We would crack jokes. We would do exercises with somebody counting 1, 2, 3, 4. You knew what exercise you were doing. No books to read, but you could they no paper or writing stuff, but
But did you feel like you were doing something important?
of course
Yeah.
we knew we were fighting Jim Crow.
So now, just curious, while you were there, you mentioned Stokely Carmichael. Martin Luther King. Did you ever visit or encounter Martin Luther King when you were doing all of this stuff?
Well, no, he came out to Tougaloo College once, and Joyce Ladner and I were co-chair of the campus civil rights group, which was almost the same as the Delta, the same people, same conversations. And we were put in charge of getting him to wherever he needed to be on campus.
Okay, so you did meet him.
I did meet him, but if we had a class, we had to be in class. So we worked out a schedule so that we could go to class and get King around campus. And so I met him there.
Okay. And you said you met Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. Tell us about him.
Well, he was a nice guy. And no matter what we hear about him for, Black Power and all, he, if you were a friend of his from back in the day, no matter how white you were a friend for life. And every time he was in town, I went down to hear him. And if he spotted me, he would call me out and ask me to stand up and say a nice thing or two about me. And yeah, we were buddies.
Marion Barry was a SNCC person, right?
Yep, same with, and we were friends for life too. And I'd go to hear him, and he'd call me out too. Bernice Regan would too, of Sweet Honey in the Rock, and from down in Albany, Georgia. And if you were a friend in the civil rights movement, you were a friend, and we're still friends, those of us who are left.
John Lewis.
Oh, John Lewis was my hug man. Every time I saw John, because Southern gentlemen hug, and he was a gentleman, I would get my hug. He could be a keynote speaker at a big convention or something. He'd call me up, Joan, I need a hug. And now that he's gone, Benny Thompson, I told him he's my hug man, and Benny follows through, okay?
Current congressman from Mississippi.
Yeah, he graduated from Tougaloo College after me, but we got that connection.
I see. So, important stuff that you went through.
Oh, I was just being me, but the March on Washington, I mean, it was the good event of that year, but I worked in the D.C. office of the March. And I was down there working in the press tent the day of the march.
So, again, it was but dedication, and you, I guess, have lasted through the years.
I'm still kicking, as my aunt said when she was 99. I'm still kicking, just not as high. I can't march anymore, but I can sure run my mouth. So I'm speaking all over the country. I even spoke in Egypt. I think it was earlier this year or last year. I think it was earlier this year. The U.S. Embassy had me and my son over at the taxpayers' expense. Thank you two very much. And we spoke at events. Basically, it was for the expats, but in many cases, anybody could come, that wanted, spoke here, there, and elsewhere. And the first night, there was a big dinner for us, and one of the people there, the embassy staff, he had on his Tougaloo sweatshirt, and his little girl had on her Tougaloo shirt, too.
I see. So, and Tougaloo, where is that located in Mississippi? In Jackson?
It's just outside of Jackson. It's in Tougaloo.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So as I said, it's as you look back on it, it must be something. But then at the same time, it must be kind of sad because you're like one of the few left.
Well, I miss my friends but at least there's still a few of us, and it's sad when you hear another one of us has died, but they've gone to a better place probably. It's not segregated in heaven.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, I'm sure it's they got more important things.
Well, the scripture says we're all created in the image of God, and it doesn't specify what religion God is, what color God is, what language God speaks. And so, if I discriminate against you, I'm defaming the Almighty. So we're all equal in the eyes of the Almighty.
Yeah. Now I notice in addition to having your Delta shirt on Vote, you also have a pin for Ukraine there. So you still have many causes, is that correct?
Yeah, but things I support, yeah. My neighbor knew I was wanted a pin from Ukraine and couldn't find one, so she got one, ordered it online and gave it to me. I swore I was going to wear it every day till the last Russian soldier was out of there. And I'm sticking with it.
And then the other thing, as you look at the world today, obviously that was 1961 when you first were dealing with a lot of that stuff. And so now we're talking about, 60 years later? Over 60 years later even.
Yeah, I first got into it in 60.
Yeah. So as you look at the situation today, what are your thoughts?
Those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. And we're certainly going backwards.
That is your...
That's my opinion. And, saying that Harvard can't have international students and we got to take out all this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. It's moving backwards.
So you wonder, you obviously fought for greater equality, and you're wondering if it's all moving.
Well, man, hopefully at the next election it will change. Yeah.
So that's your thought. Sit it out. Hopefully this is it. And
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of opposition to what's going on.
Yeah.
And we got another election coming up.
Yeah.
Hopefully not another bullet to the head, but
Yeah. So, and then the other thing that's very interesting is you're red, and so what is it like being a Delta?
Well, it's nice. It's good, and I can call out the AKAs, and I do. And when I see some lady in pink and green, at the train station or the airport or something, I inquire after them and let them know that I'm a Delta.
So Delta AKAs, that's it. And then there's one other thing about it that was just kind of interesting to me, because really, one of the big oppositions to civil rights and integration and amongst white men was that they're going to touch our white women. I mean, I've gone to Klan rallies where they said, if one of those black so-and-sos touches one of our white women, blah, blah, blah. Was that an issue? Did people, accuse you of
Sleeping with those black dudes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I got suggested that I did that, but I think the white guys were against integration because they'd have to give up those black women they were sleeping with.
What do you mean?
Well, there was a lot of, you know what I mean. You just want me to say it.
Say it.
Well, starting with the slave owners on up, that black women were in danger of being raped and caressed and all that. And if we really got integration, they might have to give that up a bit.
So you think that was part of it too?
I think that was part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah, but you got accused of having sexual relations with black men. That was
being out on that campus, da-di-da-di-da. Well, that's, black men was pretty much all there was. There was a couple of white guys there. In fact, the student body president my senior year was a white guy.
At Tougaloo?
At Tougaloo. And he ran, the black guy he ran against was equally well qualified, but I think the white guy got elected to make a statement.
Okay, yeah.
It made a pretty good statement.
But then you ultimately got married, and all 5 of your sons are white, I noticed.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. But anyway, as I said, that was one of the things that must have been out there when you were coming along. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
and my sons have done pretty good. Now, my son Loki, all of them have married outside of their original cultural group. And my son Loki has sort of outed me with his books and movies and things. And 2 of them have wives who are Japanese, ladies they met when they were teaching English in Japan. And one has an Ethiopian wife who he was living in Addis, helping get the university online back in the day, and they met.
So the names of your sons, they're interesting. Tell me about them. Names of your sons.
Bino, Django, Jomo, Loki, and Geronimo. Bino is an Italian nickname. He was conceived in Italy, but it's a nickname for a baby boy. And back in up to the 1920 census, Italians and Irish were listed as colored in the census. So there was there was segregation excluding them. And then Django is named for the jazz guitarist Django Reinhardt, who was the world's leading jazz guitarist in his day, in spite of the fact that half of one hand was inoperable. Well, one hand was pretty much inoperable due to a fire when he was a kid. I wanted my sons to have names after somebody who had to overcome a difficulty in life. Then there's Jomo, the name for Jomo Kenyatta, who had to overcome the entire British Empire, frequently from within a jail cell. Loki, the son who's outed his mom, named for the Norse god of mischief, and he's lived up to that one. But he had to, in Norse mythology, Loki had to overcome Thor's hammer. And then Geronimo, the Indian leader the Apache leader who had to overcome the entire United States Army until they finally captured him down in Mexico.
I see.
So they got names to live up to.
So have you had an influence over your son's views?
I think so. Now Django, when he was in, I think, 2nd grade, I went into a parent-teacher conference just up school just around the corner, and the teacher said she was concerned he didn't have many white friends. Well, I said I hadn't noticed. I came home and wrote out in old school cursive the names of everybody who came here to play with him, everybody whose house he went to play, and anybody else he talked about as a good buddy. I broke it down demographically. The school was a 3rd white, a 3rd Southeast Asian, and a 3rd black. He was within 1 percentage point of the school demographics. I went back and showed that to the teacher. She didn't have a thing to say. And then I think it was Bino was in 4th. He was in 4th or 5th grade, maybe 6th, 5th or 6th. And the teacher, I was helping escort a class on a field trip down to one of the museums, and she was telling me the names of the kids in my group. And the other 2 you couldn't pronounce if I told you. Well, I could say them. They were my son's best friends, Krishnan Ranganathan and Rajesh Sivarajan. I could say that. And so, yeah.
So you think you did have an influence, and
I think I did.
yeah. So it's been a good ride, huh?
Oh yeah.
Would you change anything if you could?
I'd have had a daughter in there somewhere, maybe. But
Okay.
but after 5 sons and the last 2 are identical twins, I gave up on those girls' names. I figured I'd wait for the daughter-in-laws, and they were all great.
Okay. All right. But also back to the whole idea of how you basically spent your life, the trajectory of it. Would you change anything?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, you do what the Spirit says do, and I did.
Yeah.
I'd skip the arthritis part, but you know.
Right. But in terms of, I guess I would say your political life, you're basically.
I'm satisfied with it.
Yeah. Well, the last question I always like to ask: is there anything I did not ask you that you would like to mention? Yeah.
We talked a lot.
We did talk a lot, yes. And so we talked a lot with Joan Trumpauer Mulholland, who is in many ways a hero and one of the few true civil rights leaders who are still with us. She is still out there active. She has her causes. A look at her car, you will see bumper stickers for many different causes there. And one of the people that, at least I think, has had a big impact on making this country a better place. Thanks for watching. I'm Sam Ford.
Amen. Pass the gravy. Now, the stickers all over my car, I say they're cheap souvenirs. You don't have to dust them. They self-destruct. You can always find your car in the parking lot, and it's the least likely to be stolen.
Never thought about that. That's true. He's like, man, they're easy to find. That's